Hello everybody, welcome back to Expedition Homestead. I am so stoked to have you all here today. It's going to be a really fun episode here in the backyard garden. If you're a new viewer and you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to subscribe to us, give us a thumbs up, and hit that bell icon when you subscribe so you're notified of every time that we come out with some new content here in the garden. Despite being in Wisconsin, we do grow lots of stuff, a lot of veggies, a lot of fruit trees, perennials, flowers, and then we've also got a lot of indoor plants as well. So a ton of great content on this channel year round. Today's video is going to be a little bit of an overview / like what I do in the day in the backyard. We're gonna go through the different vegetables that we have right now growing in the garden, some of the chores that we're going through. See the little guys over here with the chickens as we speak. Right now he's just feeding them some cabbage scraps that we got from fermenting cabbage earlier today. Just stuff like that. I'm gonna show you guys what we do in a day here in the garden. What happened?
They are eating it right now.
Oh, good. So one of the first things that I do when I get back home and we start doing our gardening chores is check on these guys, or gals, I should say. Make sure they're all doing good. Then we'll go inside, take a peek at their food and water. Right now, this is just a temporary watering container. We're building a larger 5-gallon one too, but we're on a second revision of it because the first one had a couple of leaks, so we had to seal it up, and that caulk is drying right now. Otherwise, this is a big 5-gallon feeder that we made just with some holes. You drilled those holes, right? Yeah, it worked out really good. So check in their food, water, make sure that all the mulch that we have in the bottom of this chicken coop is in good shape. It's not molding or anything like that. We don't want any sort of fungus or mold growth in with the chickens. Then when we're on the chickens, usually we'll throw them the veggie scraps throughout the day, or that we've had from the day. So all of our stuff like cabbage, beets, broccoli, kale, kohlrabi, all of that stuff we will throw into there when we've got some scraps. Unless we're feeling a little bit low on the compost side, we'll throw it over in the compost. But I usually get a ton of extra clippings out of the yard that I can use in the compost. So with our live animals then taken care of, what I do is take a look at the live plants. The number one thing that we have to check on just about daily is going to be our watering. So what I'll do is I'll just go over to our garden beds, reach down into the soil, and see if it's dry. It's getting there. I think today we are in need of a watering. It's been about 3 days since we've watered it, and we've had high mid-80 temperatures throughout those 3 days. Totally dry too, so today is going to be one of those watering days. Now we've got 9 raised garden beds here. So it does end up being quite a bit of watering. I do want to put an irrigation system in, but until then, we just got to water the old-fashioned way. The next thing I'll do in the garden is really just take a quick visual look and make sure that we don't have any sort of infestations on the plants. There's no overwhelming populations of any beetles or anything like that. As you can see, we've got just a couple of little holes on the cabbage, but otherwise they are holding up just fine. We've already harvested, I think, 6 or 7 cabbage heads so far. And then we've got a ton on the ready that will be producing, it looks like kind of in sequence. So it'll be a great constant supply of cabbage here. We've got no sort of issues on the tomato plants, except for the the Cherokee purple ones, if you guys have been following the channel, I noted that I had every single Cherokee purple tomato had really bad leaf curl on it, and only that specific variety in the garden. All of the rest are doing great. So that leaf curl, something happened. I'm not too worried about it. We've got lots of tomatoes. Something I do want to get out of the garden very soon here is of our peas, because they have produced pretty much the season's crop for us, and now we are getting some powdery mildew on it. So before that spreads across to different areas of the garden, I think part of today's chores is going to be chopping this up and getting that bed ready for our fall crops, so our brassicas, our kohlrabi, broccoli, kale, so on and so forth. This is going to be one of the beds that we're going to be growing those in. That really covers about 90% of what I do when I get into the garden each day, or maybe every 2 or 3 days if we're super busy during this time of the year, which normally we are. One other thing that does take a lot more work to keep up with is our tomato plants, because you can see behind me, we've got them growing on trellises. We are using the single stem method, so we're pruning back all of the suckers on our tomatoes and growing that bad boy in one single stem. Those do take a little bit more work because it seems like those suckers grow incredibly fast, and if I'm not out here every couple of days, keeping a really close eye on the plant, all of a sudden I'll have a sucker that is about 1.5 feet or 2 feet tall even in just a couple of days, one that maybe went missed from the previous pruning on those tomato plants. I would like to take a second and show you all this tomato that we have here. Incredible. I believe this is a Rutgers tomato, and it is, I don't know, 7.5, 8 feet tall, really, at this point, just about. And so the top of our trellis there is about 9 feet tall, and it is growing so well. One thing I've noticed too is that sometimes you've got this fruit set, and then along that fruit set, it will turn into another vine, which is what's happening here. So I don't want that either. I want this fruit set to be taking all of that energy instead of it going into this foliage here. So I'm going to treat this just as a sucker, and I'm going to cut it off right there. Show you an example of what I come out to every day. Sucker right there. Sucker up here. Just pinch them right off. We got suckers all over here. A big one right there. And that's most of it, except for now we've got another fruit set that's developing into a plant here. So again, like I said, I will just cut that off right here. Another thing I have to do with my tomatoes is extend the stakes that I have on these ones. I think I'm just going to go across here horizontally and kind of tie these all together and have them grow that way. So I will just support them. Oops, that one's kind of stuck on each other. I'll just support them back and forth like that and create essentially a big living wall of tomatoes growing in these 5-gallon buckets. I do really like the 5-gallon bucket idea. It saves a lot of space. You can grow them in a small space as well, but I probably won't use this staking method on them next time. I think what I'll do is I will either put them against one of our fences and then grow them out again vertically instead of horizontally, just because it is hard to stake it up in this 5-gallon. Oh, cool. So they just get so tall in this 5-gallon bucket that it would probably tip over if we got so much more wind. So I just really don't want to push it with those. That's why I'm going to grow them sideways, and I'll probably do the same thing next year when we grow them. We'll put them along the fence line and just grow them across it, and we'll see how far they grow that way. All right, update on the tomatoes. I went through and I pruned them all up. We've got a lot of suckers. Look at all that. So between suckers and then off growth, basically where this tomato vine was splitting off and growing into 2 whole new vines, I trimmed off almost all of those, except for with our super sweet 100, because they're more like a cherry tomato. So I don't care if those grow more vigorously, as long as I do keep them pruned back a little bit. There's a really nice sweet spot when it comes to indeterminate small cherry type tomatoes, where if I'm growing a larger tomato like my Rutgers tomatoes, beefsteak tomatoes, or Cherokee purple tomatoes, those ones I definitely want to make sure I prune back as much as I can into one single stem. Give you all a nice view of what it looks like. We also ran a couple of hemp runners across the top of that stake there. That way I am going to train them to go across here, fill up more space, and then probably back down again eventually and just keep growing. As you can tell, a lot of this stuff was down over on the ground. I've still got one here that is not quite long enough to get up to there. And then this one I'm going to let grow in the zucchini as a little experiment there. But most of this growth was just down below. Now we really opened up the canopy so we can get a lot of airflow in those tomatoes. And then we can also keep a closer eye on all the different suckers that might be popping up without our supervision. They're everywhere. And some of these suckers get pretty big in a couple of days as well. They grow very fast, so you want to keep them managed. So these tomatoes are doing excellent as well. We are continually harvesting. Then you can see we've got bunch of different of the super sweet 100s, some Rutgers tomatoes there, and then I think that's a beefsteak down on the end, if not another Rutgers. They're doing wonderful. I love tomatoes so much, and the kids love to come out here and pick them too, almost more than any other veggie in the garden. One other little experiment that I got going on here. With these tomatoes, I'm just letting them grow along the ground, and oddly enough, it's the tomato plant that I've got the most fruit out of so far is the one that I've just let crawl along the ground. I mean, big, massive fruit. These are also the purple or Cherokee purple tomatoes. So the ones that have been laid down on the ground for some weird reason have kind of gotten rid of the leaf curl, which I would say is an absolute anomaly. It's nothing that I want to duplicate, but I do think it's interesting that we've got far more fruit on these ones that are laying on the ground compared to the ones that are trellised. Whether or not that's going to be consistent throughout the growing season, I'm not so sure. I don't know about you, but I've never really just let my tomato vines grow on the ground as they would naturally. Growing up, I've always grown them in tomato cages, but in the last few years, I've gotten turned onto this trellising method, and I've really, really loved doing it this way, and I found great results with it as well, which is why I think this is so interesting right now. This is just one of my little garden fascinations that I've stumbled upon this year. Another one, speaking of fascinations, is this lamb's quarters that we have growing amidst our mammoth sunflowers. Yeah, that lamb's quarters, that weed there is about 8.5 feet tall, probably 9 feet tall actually. I mean, look at these things. They're huge. So lamb's quarters, if you're not familiar with it, is in the same family, I believe, as spinach. It's a highly nutritional plant, if you were to consume it on a semi-regular basis. But unfortunately, most of the time, people will just take that out of the yards, cut it out completely, and treat it as a weed. In many cases, people will treat it with a poison, poisoning their backyard, poisoning their local wildlife, and all that stuff. I just never recommend that. But lamb's quarters, that really incredible. I didn't know it could grow that tall. One place that lamb's quarters has in my garden, besides, the occasional nibble off the top, is that when I harvest out a bed, I stop weeding it towards the last 2 weeks or so before I harvest it. So now this bed that was beets and radishes is harvested out. I'm not ready for any summer crops or any fall crops to go in there yet, but I will be very shortly. In the meantime, I stopped weeding so that all of this stuff keeps on growing, and essentially it's going to partially keep that soil alive. It's going to help give it shade. It's going to help the microbial colonization in there, and it's going to really keep that soil from drying out and degrading way better than if I were to just take out all of the weeds, take out all of the clippings, everything, and just be left with bare dirt. This is going to help keep your soil alive. Quickly to talk about what we've been harvesting is, like I said before, our beets, radishes. We're continually harvesting our onions, carrots, peas, beans, tomatoes, and broccoli, cabbage, kohlrabi as well. The only stuff that we're not harvesting right now for the most part is cucumbers, because there's only a couple of them ready, and then corn is not ready yet, and our peppers are not ready yet. That's about it. So we are in full out harvest mode. We got a ton of zucchini over there. We've got a couple of pumpkin that are actually starting to grow. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to grow them back here or not, but if you see this plant that starts way back here, goes all the way over to there, that's our pumpkin. This is a field pumpkin, so we're going to use this for making, lanterns and stuff like that. So there is our first little pumpkin on the homestead. So excited. We've got 8-ball zucchini and then black beauty zucchini and one other zucchini I don't remember the name of, but it's more of like a calico color, so it's a lighter green with a bunch of white spots on it. And then we've got our summer squash over here that it's not doing too hot. I think it's either holding too much moisture or not holding enough moisture for the squash. In my mind, I think it makes more sense that it's holding too much moisture in those buckets, but they received some damage early on in the growing season. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to bounce back from it or not. I mean, we'll see. Either way, we'll get a ton of squash out of the garden too. That's pretty much it for the backyard. That's everything that I do in a day. It varies a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's going to be watering, making sure that I'm up on the nutrients. It's going to be taking cuttings and pruning the plants back, checking to see if there's anything to harvest, and making sure that there's no infestations or bacteria that is damaging the plants as well. Now we'll just go into the front. We got a couple of garden beds up there as well, and I think that'll be it. Up front here, we've got another raised garden bed that we've made. We've got gladiolas in here, zinnias, some clematis, or I forget what this is. I'm sure some of you know what this is. I should know what it is too, but I don't remember offhand. It's not a clematis. You guys, comment below if you know what this is and you're still watching the video. Thank you, by the way. And then we've got sunflowers, which a sign that we need to water right here. The leaves are getting a little bit limp. So we're going to water this bed real good today. You can see the zinnias in the back. In hindsight, I should have put them in the front of the planter, but I thought they would have grown a lot taller than this by now. For some reason, they are staying like ridiculously short, super short zinnias. So I was going to grow them really tall in the back. Then we've got the sunflowers and gladiolas, but I should have put the zinnias in the front, then the gladiolas, and then the sunflowers. But oh well, hindsight is 2020. And then we've got our beautiful front garden. I would say beautiful for its first year. We just put this in and we're trying to populate it with all of the plants we want growing. So most of these are only in their first year of growth. So the second and third year we should really see this whole garden bed start to fill out and take its place here in the home. I do love the variety of plants that we have, so I'm excited for you guys to see how this grows this next year, because it's going to be quite a sight to see. I think it's going to be so beautiful, especially compared to when we first bought the house. There was just a couple of junipers out front and like cedars, so it was like it just did not look good whatsoever. So we tore all those out. We got all these beautiful plants growing instead. All right, well, that just about covers it. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. I hope it was fun to just kind of go on and see what I do throughout the day. If you guys have anything that you would like to see specifically in the garden, or if you have any questions, of course, feel free to comment down below. I'll try to get to as many as I possibly can. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. With that being said, I wish you all a happy gardening adventure, and we'll see you in the next episode.